Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Open Mic Podcast Live. And if you are listening to this, we are doing another fantastic live stream, and we will put this on the audio stream later. But with me today, I have a really cool guest, Scott Christian Sava. He is the writer and director of this awesome Netflix film that came out a couple months ago called Animal Crackers, starring John Krasinski and Emily Blunt and a myriad of other amazing people. But I have to be honest, I'm a little bit distracted because his studio is like a hobbit hole. Talk about that. Goodness gracious. I have never seen anything like this before, Scott. This is so cool.
Thanks, Brett. We I live in Franklin, Tennessee, and we've been in this house for quite a while, and we found out that there was mold in my office, black mold. And so my friend who does construction, he said, we're going to have to just take everything out, tear it down, bleach it. And so we did, but he showed me some designs. He goes, I think because you're a hobbit by nature, I don't like to leave the house. I just love being at home. And so he says, I'm going to turn your room into a hobbit hole. And so we did. And it's a lot of fun. It's mostly, just paint and fake wood paneling and styrofoam wood and whatnot. But it's kind of like a movie set. It's all a facade, but it is fun. It's a magical place to work.
Yeah, well, I imagine it probably lends itself to lots of creativity, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it
you're
really
inspired constantly. And I think as creatives, oftentimes there's always something going on inside of the brain, right? Like it doesn't ever turn off. I imagine for you, an animator and somebody who creates on that level, I mean, it's just always going, right? Like it's nonstop.
Yeah. If I didn't have to sleep, I wouldn't.
Well, let's talk about this fun film that came out. I think it was just a couple of months ago. Animal Crackers, which was on Netflix, and it has Emily Blunt, Danny DeVito, John Krasinski, Ian McKellen, and Sylvester Stallone. And you wrote and co-directed this with, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Tony Bancroft, who is part of the Disney family, who helped create The Lion King, Pumbaa, and those iconic moments and characters. Let's talk about how the idea came about and what sort of led you to this path to create this fun animated film, which is available still, and it's for everybody, right? Anybody can watch it.
It's a great kids film. It came out actually a month ago yesterday, the 24th of July. So I have twin boys, and I've written probably over a dozen books for them just over the years. And whenever they're into something or whenever inspiration hits, I'll write My Grandparents Are Secret Agents, Cameron and His Dinosaurs, Pet Robots, Ed's Terrestrials, Magic Carpet, whatever we're into at the time. And we were outside eating those Barnum animal crackers. And I just had the idea, what if when you ate a lion cookie, poof, you became a lion? And they loved it, and I just wrote it down and eventually turned it into a graphic novel. Boy, that was, the boys were 8, I think, at the time, so that was probably around, maybe they were younger, but it was probably around 2009, 2010, and we got a call from Harvey Weinstein, of all people, who wanted to turn it into a movie, and It fortunately it didn't work out with him. We'll just say.
I was going to say, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
We digress on that part.
Yeah, but we wound up raising the funds to make the movie ourselves, and so we made the film completely independently, which was just amazing. And we had no studio or investors or anybody telling us what to do. And Tony and Dean Laurie, who co-wrote it with me, and Jamie Thomason, who was our casting director, and everybody, we just were able to do whatever we wanted to do. So it was just me and my wife making decisions, and she was, running everything, and I was creatively running everything, and we just had a blast, and it was great.
Yeah. Now, so you wrote this and you put it all together. at what point did Netflix show interest in this as something that they wanted to put on their streaming service? Because it seems like these days there are like a lot of different places you can go with content. I mean, there's Quibi, Tubi,
Yeah.
Netflix, Hulu, and we'll talk about film distribution later because I do have some questions about that in that regard. But as far as like the initial interest from Netflix, how did that partnership come about? And did you sell it to them? We don't have to get into money, but I'm curious
Yeah.
because I know it works different ways. Like they buy it from you, or you sell it to them, or they come to you and say, we want to do this. How did all of that come about?
They approached Michael Favell, who was our sales agent from Australia. He was
Okay.
at the Cannes Film Festival uh, last year, 2019, and they came to him, and it was just around the time where Disney Plus started up, and they were really taking animation seriously. They had just bought Klaus, and I think that was coming out towards the end of the year, and we thought the deal was great. We thought it was a wonderful home, and we were really happy to sign on with them. And of course, it took a little while to get the contracts, all together, and then it was a matter of delivering all the elements. And they have to, really work a lot to get. You'll notice that there's always a different image. When you go to Netflix, and they put in algorithms. They really consider themselves a tech company and not a movie studio.
Really?
And so there's a lot that goes into the back end, the insides of it that you just don't see. They don't do any marketing. They don't treat it like a Hollywood studio would. It's all algorithms and just putting in so that way it goes to the right people.
Interesting. So that's funny that you mentioned the screen thing, because I always wondered about that, because I go on there and there's like a different image every single time, and I'm like, my OCD alarms go off because I'm like, why is that picture different? And it tricks me and says, oh, there's a new version of this or a new season, and it's like, nope, it's the same one.
It's the same one.
So that's an interesting point that you make, Scott. So Netflix, they don't consider themselves a film company. They consider themselves just like a tech company. So they're a tech company that just happens to distribute movies, and then they come to you, and the process goes about of you getting it on there. But it's not a matter of them just buying the film and then putting it up. There's like months and months, maybe even a years sometimes, to get something on there is basically how it works.
Yeah. I mean, for us, I think it took about 6 months. From I think it was around January to July 24th was what it took from delivering all of the assets of the film to them, because they take what you give them. They produce a new trailer. They produce new thumbnails and background pages and whatnot, and they input all this stuff into the algorithms. They also translated it into like 100 different languages. So they had to go and hire actors in different countries to produce Spanish and German and Italian and whatnot. So they did all of that. So there was a lot of work that went into it. But it was worth it. It wound up being the #1 animated film on Netflix in the world for both July and August. So, I think it was worth it for them at least to put that in there. It did really well for them.
Right. Well, and I would say it did really well for you too, because I mean, you've been writing, directing, drawing, creating for a very long time. I mean, going back 10, 15 plus years. I mean, I know you've done a lot of work with types of shows such as like Power Rangers and different other animated types of cartoons and things like that. Growing up, were you always a naturally crafty person as far as like doodling and drawing, or is that a skill that you developed later and then realized this is something that I'm really good at?
No, it was something I've always done. I grew up in an artistic family. My uncles, my mom were artists, and so it was a natural thing for me. I've been drawing since I was 5 or 6. I knew from when I was a kid I wanted to do Spider-Man. That was my thing. I wanted to be the artist on Spider-Man on the comic book. And I went to art school. I went to the Academy of Art in San Francisco. I was an illustration major. My junior year there, I got an internship at Sega of America working on video games. So I did video games for a while. And then I moved down to Los Angeles and got into animation for TV and film. And just one of those things where the career kind of progressed, and it went here and it went there, and took all these different loops and routes. But it was cool. And it wasn't until I was in my early 30s that I got to do Spider-Man. I got to be the artist on Spider-Man. I kind of got that out of my system. And then my wife and I, we had kids, and I started making independent comic books just for them. And we moved to Franklin, Tennessee, and the rest is history.
So what led you to Tennessee? Because I know, well, I mean, Hollywood, New York, Tennessee, I mean, those are all, I guess, meccas, right, for creativity. Like Tennessee has gone into a boom, I would say, just from pure observation in the last 10 years, where you can go there and do anything. They're making films and movies there. I don't know, maybe not right now because of everything happening, but outside of that, it's become another place you can go, right, to create. Like, it's not like you have to be in LA or New York these days to really put out content, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, we left LA because it was LA. We just didn't want to raise the kids there.
Yeah, makes sense.
And Tennessee was just a nice, quiet place. When we moved here 13 years ago, it was a nice, quiet little place, and now it's built up. It's gotten much bigger, but it was a good creative place for music. Unfortunately, I don't really listen to country music, so it didn't really benefit me at all. But it's been good. It's been a really good place to raise the kids. And it was nice because I didn't spend, when I was in LA, I'd spend all of my times doing meetings, and you spend all your time driving, sitting in traffic. And so now I spend my time creating. And so I think that time was better well spent living here.
Yeah. I mean, in LA, it's like you're going from A to B, excuse me. And then when you get to B, you have to find a parking spot, right? And then I just hear all these horror stories of people just parking wherever they want, and then they come out and their car's got a ticket or it's been booted because they went to an audition in some skyrise building in the middle of, the valley somewhere, and there's nowhere to park. And now you're just dealing with all of this minutia of trying to get things done. And I think with what you do in regards to drawing and creating, you can sort of just do it all from there, right? In that, as far as that goes, like there's not, like if you have to take meetings, Zoom is probably the preferred choice. Right?
Yeah. I mean, before the pandemic, it was phone calls. When we would do the recordings, I would fly to Spain or London or New York or LA. But for the most part, I could do everything on a phone call. And there's really no need for me to, even directing the film, I was able to do from the house. I was just log into a virtual server where the shots are loaded up, and I could give my notes and even do sketches with a Wacom tablet. It was all good.
Yeah. And I think too, working from home, it allows you to spend time with your family and your kids, right? And so they are able to participate in what you're doing. Do the kids show any kind of interest in what you do? Do they have a desire to follow in dad's footsteps and be an animator, or are they just more like, this is cool what he does, but I'm gonna kind of do my own thing, so to speak?
No, they want to be their own kids, their own people. One wants to go to college out in California and be a zookeeper. The other one wants to go to college at Penn State and work on the rail systems. He loves trains. So I try to involve them in creative stuff. I made a couple music videos with one of my boys. And that was fun, but they want to be their own kids. And I think they also see the struggles that artists have just making a living, They're
right.
Like, I don't know if I want that kind of life.
Right. Well, I think what you do, albeit money is nice, right? And everybody says this, but what you're doing is, it's more of the passion and the ability to create, right? I mean, you wrote and animated a film with an amazing co-director, a team, and it's a box of animal crackers that comes to life, and there's a story, and there's a lot of really just beautiful themes and all of that. And that is just, I think, out of passion, right? Like, you like to do that, you want to tell stories, and I think it's great, right? Because
Yeah.
you're doing what you love and you're able to do it from your home. You don't have to deal with the Hollywood life, so to speak, and you can just take your time and just brew and whatever it is that you're working on. And I think it's cool too. You mentioned earlier that you were able to do Spider-Man eventually as well, which is great. You mean, you had goals
Yeah.
and you were able to achieve those goals as a creator, right? And that had to feel good when you got to that point, I would imagine, right? Like,
It
I've
does.
done this, and now it's what's next, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to set a goal and to be able to reach it. And not too many people get to do those things. I mean, getting to be the artist on Spider-Man, it took me 15 years of going to conventions and getting rejected and getting rejected and getting rejected till I finally got the opportunity. And the same thing with making the movie. God, it took several years to get the film funded, and then another 6 years to get it out. So there was a decade of my life dedicated to that. But getting it done, getting those out there, even if they're not, the story for Spider-Man wasn't the story I wanted. The release we got and the hardships that we went through for getting Animal Crackers out was not ideal. And you can be focused on those negatives, or you can be thankful that you got to fulfill a dream and the accomplishment that you got to make.
And it has to be exciting, right? To like turn on the TV and there is your work just sitting there for
It
literally
is.
millions and millions of people, billions, I would even say, to watch.
Yeah, it really is. It's it's amazing. I've been doing interviews with people in New Delhi, Pakistan, Germany, Italy. I mean, you're talking to people in China. It's amazing to see it kind of spread around the world, and responding to people from all over the world who've watched it. I love seeing the trailers in Portuguese and just all the different languages, and it's a lot of fun. It really is humbling.
Yeah, yeah. And I appreciate your honesty in that, because I think, I was talking to another actor a couple months ago, and he's just now getting ready to go back to work after this whole 5 or 6 months of being bunkered up in Topanga Canyon in California and not being able to go or do anything. And now he's going to New Mexico to work. He said something quite interesting, and the fact is that his father is also a very famous actor, and so he has followed in his footsteps and heavily has not relied on that to get him where he's at. But he's been doing it for so long, over 160 films, he said. And he goes, he's still proving himself to the industry that he can do this, right? And it's
Wow.
not just a matter of, sitting at home and just having the ability to turn things down left and right, but being able to selectively pick things. But my point is that, there's a lot of pain and suffering and blood and tears that go into this film, unless you're like somebody who has the backing of a studio, which I don't even know if that's really even, it's hard to get that, right? If to pitch a film, to get a studio to back it, to give you
Yeah.
$20 million. But then I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you don't have the creative control as much as you would like at that point, right? Unless,
Yeah.
like you did with this film. So say it got backed by somebody else. We won't mention any names, but my point is that, not that they would ever see this, but you never know, I guess. And they said, "Hey, we want to do this for you." It would be a lot different of a story, I would imagine, right? Because the
Yeah.
creative control for you would be probably, I don't want to say less, but you would have a lot more talking heads in the room with you, right? To kind of
Yeah.
help you make decisions.
You'd be dealing with marketing and accounting and merchandising and whatnot, which would make the film better and bigger. I mean, not better, but make it bigger. But this was a wonderful experience to just like, there was a period in the film, and I wrote the script, so it's all my fault. But there was a period in the film where Horatio, Ian McKellen's character's monologuing. It was the part of the story where we kind of needed to know why he's the antagonist. And we were listening to Ian McKellen say it. We were looking at the storyboards and we're going, and I just thought, this is monologuing. And even though it's Ian McKellen, who sounds wonderful, is there anything we could do to spice this section up? And I was talking to either Tony or Jamie, our casting director, and I said, they said, what do you suggest? And I said, well, what if he broke out into song? And they said, well, two things. One, we don't know how to write music, and two, Ian McKellen's a Shakespearean actor; he doesn't sing. And we were able to just go for it, to just try it. Well, let's just see. And we contacted Dan Povenmire and Swampy Marsh, who created Phineas and Ferb, and they wrote us a song. And we flew out to London and we convinced Ian McKellen to sing a duet with Gilbert Gottfried, and it was fun. And is it perfect? No, but it's fun. And it was
Right.
It's that kind of fun stuff that we just kept doing. It was, well, what if we tried this? What if we tried? I mean, I think I have 5 music montages and 2 musical numbers because they seem like fun. And so nothing we did was traditional. Nothing we did was what you would see in a Disney movie. It was just fun for fun's sake. And we figured, let's just put it out there. Let's just tell the story the way we want to and see how the reaction is. And for the most part, the reaction has been good. Of course, there's a couple negative reviews. And of course, there's some people who don't, because they expect a Pixar Disney kind of film, but it's not that. It is what it is. And I love it for that.
Right. And you have to have Disney Pixar money to do do those kind of things, right?
10 times the budget. Yeah.
It's a steak dinner on a bologna budget, as a friend of mine used to say, but it's a great movie. Like when you watch it and you're just listening to it and observing it, I mean, it's beautiful. It's just a very well done, in my opinion, and I'm not just saying this, very beautiful, very well written story. And there's a lot of values and a lot of things that my 6-year-old picks up on and questions that he asks. Right. And it's a great movie. Like, we've watched it 100 times. So, well, you're welcome. But he likes it, and it's just fun because that's his thing. If it's not that, it's Scooby-Doo or Black Panther. It's just he latches onto it, and it's like, the funny little moments where the characters do little things, and just little things. It's like, oh, it's funny. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, but the fact that you were able to anchor Tony Bancroft, to get him involved in it, and to just you got all these big names. One question: when you're pitching a film like this, an independent type of film, what are some of the challenges that you face when it comes to securing talent, like Krasinski or Emily or Ian McKellen or anybody like that, when you're coming at this from a non-studio picture perspective and you're like, we've got this movie, this is the pitch, do you want to be a part of it? How does that process work? Is it a little bit more challenging than it might be traditionally?
Oh, absolutely. And all credit goes to, again, Jamie Thomason and Curtis Kohler, who are casting directors. I wasn't in the room. I'm not a salesperson, so they were the ones who sent out the script, and they had to try to convince these agents to look at a no-name company. They had never heard of Blue Dream Studios. We'd never made a movie before. I was not a marketable name. It was just that was the challenge. Was we were nobody. I would think now that we've got a film out, now that we could say it was a hit, we might have a little bit better of a chance. But it was we got offers for your Johnny Depps or your Leonardo DiCaprios or whatnot, but they were just way out of our budget. And so really what happened was we had to find the actors who really liked the script.
Okay.
So that was it. I mean, Danny DeVito and Sylvester Stallone, Ian McKellen, they didn't come onto the film because of the money we were paying, because we weren't paying very good money at all. It was a very low budget. It was 1/10 of a Pixar budget. So we were not paying good money. They came on because they liked the script. And that was
Sure.
really, if you're nobody, if you're trying to do, you better have a darn good script. And so that was really it. And all credit to them for taking the chance on us. Because we were only looking for like one big name. We weren't expecting like all of those big names. And we actually went and got more money to cover that, because originally the budget was $11 million. So we got more money to cover that. And again, it's not like some people think we spent most of our money on the cast. We didn't. It was very, very little. It was maybe 10% of our budget, if that was to the cast. When the cast got so big, it went from a direct to DVD to a theatrical release was what we were looking at. And so we spent another $5 million on upping the quality of the film. So we went back so we could, rework some shots, so we could, make the lighting better, make the rendering better, give it a much better look. And so really a lot of that money just went into the quality of the film. That's why it doesn't look like one of those, and I'm not going to name names, but it doesn't look like one of those cheap animated movies that you see coming out.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, to be honest, it kind of was to me, just as a film person, a cinephile, kind of like a throwback to the Don Bluth days, just very pure and honest, like the Black Cauldron type of, sort of look back in the early days. But I think, but it was beautiful in my opinion. It was great.
It's funny because John Pomeroy, who was one of our board artists, he was one of the co-founders of Don Bluth Animation.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and he lives out here in Franklin, Tennessee.
Well, that would stand to reason why it kind of looked a little bit the way that it did. And, to be honest with you, those types of movies I think are harder to sell when you're, 11 million, that's like pre-production on some movies, that's like the first week of let's get set up and do this. But I think a lot of the cast that you has had a lot of experience or done a lot of independent type films anyway. At least I know John Krasinski has and Emily Blunt. And so they're the type of people that to me seem like they would get involved in something just because your script has integrity and it's honest and truthful and that sort of thing. And it's really just one of these things that it's a good story. And that's what sells it to these people. And McKellen and just everybody that you had from tip to tail, just made it a great film. Now, I was going to ask you, had the pandemic not happened, was your original plan to release it in theaters, or would that have incurred more of a cost? No, we were just going to go to DVD and that was it.
The film was finished in 2017. And
right.
3 distributors who wanted to put it out in theaters. But to do that, they had to raise $30-40 million to market it, because the theaters won't take a movie unless you're spending gobs of money marketing, which is ridiculous on a $19 million movie to spend $40 million marketing it. It's just, it's crazy. But it was just one of those things where that was the climate of 2017, 2018, 2019. It wasn't until this year that movie directly to Netflix was a viable option, especially for animation. It's with this cast. So it was just one of those things where all of the stars aligned for this to happen. Now, if the pandemic hadn't happened, we were going to do a nice premiere at Netflix where the cast was going to come in, and that would have been really nice to kind of get everybody together, because really we didn't, most of the cast didn't get to meet one another. Ian McKellen was in London. Sometimes Emily and John were in London because she was getting ready for Mary Poppins. Other times, it was Harvey Fierstein and Wallace Shawn and Gilbert Gottfried were in New York. And then everybody else was in LA. And Patrick Warburton was the only one who really got to kind of, because he was really cool. He would call me up and he would check in on stuff. And he was just really just a great guy, because he had worked with Tony on a couple films. Obviously Tony was the lead animator of Kronk for Emperor's New Groove.
I was going to say.
Yeah, so that was really cool. But because Patrick was keeping tabs on stuff and we were in talks, I would let him know when I was, working with Sylvester Stallone or John or Emily. And so he would come out. So I've got pictures of him hanging out with Stallone and John Krasinski and Emily Blunt, which was really fun. He's really cool. But other than
great.
that, they never really got to meet. So that would have been a really fun thing to have everybody together in one room.
Yeah. Well, I love it. And Scott, I love that we were able to connect on LinkedIn and get you on, because once the movie came out, I wanted to get you on the show. And of course, finding people sometimes is easier than not. And then we connected on LinkedIn somehow. And I was like, well, I don't normally ask talent or people this way, but I'm going to just ask. And then if I have to go through a publicist, I will. But thank you for agreeing to do it, because this has been a lot of fun. And the movie's great. It's just a lot of fun. Yeah, of course. And of course, it's on Netflix now. And will it go to other distribution channels later down the road, or is Netflix just going to nest on it for a while? And
I don't know. This is my first time, so I don't know what happens next. But
no worries. Yeah. I know sometimes those movies kind of work their way, onto other platforms like Apple or whatever. But it's a great movie. One last question here as we wrap up. Looking back at your long career, out of everything that you've done, is there anything that you would have done differently that maybe would have changed the path that you're on now? Or if not, would you have just kept everything the same and are just thankful for everything that's happened to you up to this point?
No, I think everything worked out the way it was supposed to. I'm not thrilled with some of the events, but I don't know how I could have changed anything, even with a crystal ball or something like that. So I'm really happy with how everything came out, and I'm looking forward to another 50 years of making more art.
Yeah, and you have other creative outlets as well. You have a podcast, right, that you do with Tony Bancroft.
No, that's Tony and his brother. They do.
Okay.
Brothers, yeah.
Well, I know you had done. I apologize.
I was a guest on it, which was fun. But no, I don't. I just been. For me, I've got all my other books. I'm starting other movies, and I just sketch every day. So I've been just, keeping a journal, and people seem to like those little time lapses of my.
Those are super cool. Yeah, I mean, you could probably sell those on some of the original storyboard renderings. I mean, people like that kind of stuff. It's I think from the outside in, like outside of having the show and being able to talk to people, we find your world very interesting and different than what most of us experience on a 9-to-5 job. It's not something that we're used to. And so we have these visions of grandeur of, what it is that you do and kind of your process. And thank you for letting us in, peeling the curtain back, letting us see the wizard and go, it's sometimes it's not pretty, but if you're doing something that you love and that you're passionate about, well, then, you can't lose because, and you have a really cool office. Did Sir Ian McKellen see that at all? I have to ask, did he?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I wish he's welcome to come anytime.
That's funny. Well, we have been chatting with Scott Christian Sava. He is the owner of Blue Dream Studios and the writer and co-director of Animal Crackers, which is now available on Netflix. And he's also on LinkedIn and social media, and he puts up these really cool time-lapse drawings almost regularly now where you can watch him draw. You put one up the other day that you were drawing. Was it? I can't remember somebody maybe from Hamilton or something like that.
I've been doing Hamilton lately.
Jeez.
For my son.
Yeah, that's wicked crazy just watching you do that. Really funny story here before we wrap up. I don't know if you've ever been to Disneyland before.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you have, but they have that Animation Academy over at California Adventure. I don't know if you've ever done it. Okay. It's really interesting and very humbling experience because in true Disney style, you come in and you sit down and they have an animator come out and you draw a character of the day. So it could be Crush, it could be Minnie Mouse, Mickey Mouse, and they're talking and there's a little bit of sarcasm and humor that goes along with this whole presentation, but they draw these characters and then you're doing everything, or you swear that you're doing everything that they're doing, and their picture comes up and it's gorgeous. And then your picture comes up and it looks like it was drawn by a 1-year-old. And and then they look at your picture and they kind of tease you a little bit. So that's my limited experience with animation.
Oh yeah.
But I hats off to you, sir, for what you do. And thank you for being on the show. We're going to wrap the broadcast up here, and then we'll have a wrap out. But Scott, thanks for hanging out with me on the show
Thanks
today.
for
I
having
appreciate me.
Thanks a lot.